Welcome to Sinister Stories, where the shadows hold more than just secrets. If you're a fan of the dark and the twisted, you're in the right place. Tonight, we dive into a tale that will send chills down your spine. Before we begin, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss a single spine-tingling story. Some folks call him Big Bad John, not because he's mean or unfriendly. Nah, John's the type to hold the door open, fix a leaky faucet for free, or make kids laugh with that deep, gravelly voice of his. But when the sun goes down and that school gets real quiet, that's when the nickname feels earned. John's been the night janitor at Ridgeway Middle School for 22 long years. It's a full-time gig in the summer, getting ready for those noisy, sugar rush-hyped kids to return. Floor buffing, locker cleaning, fixing what the teachers left broken in May. It's like prepping a war zone, he jokes, always with a worn-out smile under his thick white mustache. He was a Navy SEAL back in the day, though he rarely talks about it. You'd only know if you spotted the tattoo on his forearm or asked him about the limp he walks with when it rains. He's tough, smart, and unshakable. Which is good, because working nights at Ridgeway ain't for the faint of heart. It wasn't long after he started that Principal Merriweather, back when she still had black hair and both knees, handed him a sheet of paper that didn't look like part of any employee handbook. It was yellowed, handwritten, and paper clipped to a small flashlight. It had 3 rules. Do not go into the gym between 2:30 a.m. and 3:10 a.m. Do not take the trash out after 10 p.m. Carry a flashlight at all times. LED only. At first John laughed, then he looked into her eyes and stopped. "They're not jokes, John," she said. "This place changes after dark. Follow the rules and you'll be just fine." Most folks wouldn't have lasted a week. But John? He adjusted. Said it wasn't so different from the weird missions he did overseas. Just another battlefield. Different enemy. So every night John clocks in at 6 p.m., empties the trash by 9 sharp, double-checks everything's locked, and makes his rounds with an industrial LED flashlight clipped to his belt and a .45 tucked under his work shirt. The school's quiet, peaceful almost, until midnight. That's when the whispers start. It's like the building exhales. Lockers rattle even when no one's near them. The lights flicker, but only the halogens. The LEDs stay strong. That's the trick, he learned. The things that crawl through this place hate LED light. Something about the frequency makes them retreat. Doesn't kill them, but it keeps them off your neck. He's seen them, you know. The first time was 15 years back. A kid named Rick was working summer maintenance, cleaning out lockers. Rick thought he'd toss one last bag of trash after 10 p.m. Just one. John heard the back door open and bolted. By the time he made it to the lot, Rick was surrounded. Tiny little gremlin-looking bastards, all teeth and sinew, clawing toward him. They walked like spiders but hissed like snakes. Rick was frozen in terror. John hit him with the LED. They scattered like cockroaches, screeching and scrambling under dumpsters and into the storm drains. He never saw them come out again that night. From that point on, John was more than just a janitor. He was Ridgeway's protector, the unofficial night warden of whatever the hell haunted that school. Sometimes he peeks through the gym doors at the wrong time just to remind himself why he follows the rules. Between 2:30 and 3:10 a.m., you can see them. Huge, 3-legged creatures, upside down, walking on the ceiling like it's their floor. Long limbs, wet skin that glistens under the emergency lights, and hollow eyes that somehow glow with hunger. They come from the bleachers, slinking out like shadows. He's seen them crawl down the walls, sniffing the air. The rumor? Back in 1972, the Ridgeway Ravens basketball team did a winter overnight in the gym. They found a book under the bleachers. Some say it was bound in skin. A few of them read from it, probably thinking it was a joke. Kids will be kids, right? They were never seen again. Some say those boys became the creatures. Others believe the book summoned something that never left. Either way, the rule stuck. Stay out of the gym after 2:30 a.m. John never broke that one. He's heard the sounds, the thudding above the tiles, the bleachers creaking when there's no one in them. And he knows that if you walk in, they'll see you, smell you, and take you. He's made it this long because he follows the rules, but all it takes is one person who doesn't. The summer heat clung to the walls like sweat as John mopped the last classroom on the west wing. The AC was busted again, third time that month, and the only thing keeping him from frying was a portable fan he rolled with him like a loyal sidekick. It was 9:04 p.m. He checked his watch, cursed under his breath, and hustled toward the back door with the last cart of trash. A half-eaten sandwich, a broken globe, and someone's moldy gym socks from a forgotten locker. He didn't care. It all had to go before the second hand rolled past 10. He flung the dumpster open, tossed the bags in one by one, and slammed the lid shut. As he did, a breeze brushed past him, unnaturally cold for a Kansas summer night. He froze, slowly reached for the flashlight on his belt and flicked it on. Nothing. Just the faint flicker of the parking lot halogen lights and the sound of cicadas. But he knew better. He waved the beam across the yard like a soldier sweeping a jungle, eyes narrowing as the beam caught movement behind the fence. Something small, hunched, scuttling low to the ground. "Too early," he muttered. "It ain't even 10 yet." That's when he realized it wasn't coming for him. It was watching, testing. The creatures were getting bold. John took 2 steps back toward the door, keeping the beam steady. The thing hissed, low and slow, before darting behind the air conditioning unit and disappearing into the shadows. He exhaled, locked the door behind him, and muttered, "Damn pests are getting braver." Back inside, he did what he always did. Routine kept him sane. He buffed the floors, one hallway at a time, always moving in loops, so nothing could sneak up behind him. The LED flashlight clipped to his shirt collar pointed wherever he looked, casting harsh, sterile light through every corner. He cleaned out lockers while humming old country songs, stopping only to scribble notes on lockers that needed paint or new hinges. At exactly 1:30 a.m., he took his break in the faculty lounge. A peanut butter and jelly sandwich, half a cup of coffee, and one more glance at the rules sheet taped inside his locker. It wasn't for him. He knew the rules like scripture. It was to remind himself why he'd lived to tell the tale. He still remembered the locker worker he saved all those years back. Rick. Kid left after that night and never came back. Joined a church, last he heard. Sent John a Christmas card every year that just said, "Thanks for the light." At 2:20 a.m., John passed by the gym doors. He didn't look in. Not yet. He went to the janitor's closet down the hall and pulled out a high-powered LED floodlight. Custom-made, military grade. Another habit, just in case. At 2:30 a.m. sharp, he stood across from the gym and looked through the glass panes on the double doors. There they were. First, the mist. It always started with the mist rolling in like dry ice across the hardwood floor. Then, one by one, the bleachers groaned open. A fleshy, wet sound followed as the creatures pulled themselves from beneath the seats. Too long. Too slick. Not meant for our world. The 3-legged ones. One had a jersey still hanging from its warped frame. Blue and white. The number 14, barely visible. They moved like broken spiders, upside down on the ceiling, twisting their heads in ways human necks weren't meant to go. They sniffed the air, eyes glowing faintly, as if they could smell something living on the other side of the door. John knew the rules. Do not enter. Do not look too long. He gave them 10 seconds, then stepped away. Back to work. He still had 2 floors left to mop and a classroom with a chalkboard that refused to erase. That's when the overhead intercom crackled. It hadn't been used in years. Static hummed through the halls before a soft voice whispered, "John." He froze. Nobody else was supposed to be here tonight. No faculty, no crew, just him. He flicked his flashlight off, then back on, walked toward the front office. The light above the gym door flickered. Something was wrong. He walked faster. The lounge was empty. The office, locked. He turned the corner and spotted it. Room 207. The lights were on. Inside, A woman sat cross-legged on the floor with streamers and paper cutouts surrounding her. A small Bluetooth speaker played soft jazz. She looked up, startled. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think anyone else was here. I'm Miss Albright, the new art teacher." John's stomach dropped. He hadn't been told anyone would be working tonight. "You were supposed to let me know," he said, voice flat. "There are rules." She laughed awkwardly. "I didn't mean to break any rules. I just wanted to get a head start decorating my classroom. Got a little carried away, I guess. I must have dozed off." "What time is it?" he asked, already dreading the answer. She glanced at her phone. "About 2:36? John's eyes went wide. "Where have you been since waking up?" he asked, heart pounding now. "I was looking for a vending machine, figured maybe the gym had one." John dropped his mop and ran. John's boots slammed against the tile as he sprinted past the main office and down the hallway toward the gym. The LED flashlight in his hand bounced wildly with each stride, its beam jerking across lockers, walls, and the flickering lights above. His breath came in sharp bursts, not from fear, but from urgency. Rage and dread rolled in his gut like thunderclouds. The gym doors were open, not wide, just cracked, but that was enough. Enough for them to smell her, enough for them to see her. "Miss Albright!" he shouted. "Get out of there! Now!" No answer. The hallway felt stretched, like the school itself didn't want him to reach her. Like time had thickened into syrup. When he reached the doors, he stopped. Just for a second. Mist was pouring out across the floor, curling around his boots like fingers. From inside, there was no sound, no screams, no cries for help. Just that low, guttural breathing. And then, one soft voice. "Big John? Help." It was hers. He turned on the floodlight and shoved the doors open. The beam cut through the gym like a holy blade. The mist retreated. Shapes hissed and scurried. He caught glimpses, long bent limbs vanishing into shadows, claws scraping across the ceiling, and pale, eyeless faces twisted in rage at the light. The bleachers were wide open, dark hollows beneath them still writhing. But no Miss Albright. He swept the floor with the light, heart hammering. "You hear me, girl? Where are you?" A thud came from the far left corner, where the vending machines used to be before they were moved in 2015. John marched toward the sound, light steady, hand on his pistol. One wrong move, one flicker, and they'd be on him like flies on roadkill. Another noise, softer now, like fingernails on wood. He reached the corner, and there it was, her ID badge, torn from the lanyard, spattered with something dark and wet. No. He turned slowly, scanning the ceiling. They were all there, dozens of them, clinging like giant bats. Some wore tatters of uniforms, jerseys, sneakers, even a whistle on one creature that might have once been the coach. They didn't move. They just watched. They had what they came for. John backed away, never lowering the light. The second he stepped over the gym threshold, he kicked the doors shut and yanked the bolt lock. His hands trembled, not from fear, but fury. He slammed the floodlight down on the front desk and grabbed the office phone. Dead. Of course it was. No security, no backup, no help. He stormed back to room 207. Empty. The chair she sat in still spun slightly, like someone had just gotten up. Her supplies were scattered, streamers half pinned to the walls, a box of paints open on her desk. On the floor was a note, scribbled hastily. "Thought I heard vending machines near the gym. Be back in a sec." John crumpled it in his fist. He stood there for a while, jaw clenched, breathing slow. Then he did what he always did. He went back to work. By 4 a.m., he'd finished the last floor and locked every door. The gym remained sealed, locked from the outside with a thick chain and padlock he hadn't used in years. It wouldn't stop them if they really wanted out, but it might slow them down. At 5:15 a.m., just before the sun started to rise, he made his final rounds. He walked the halls in silence, Flashlight on, pistol ready. At 5:45 a.m., he clocked out and left a note for Principal Hargrove. "We lost one. Tell the staff again. If anyone plans to work nights, they check with me first, or next time it won't just be one." He folded it neatly and taped it to the staff bulletin board. Then he walked out into the dawn, lit a cigarette, and sat on the school steps. The LED flashlight sat in his lap, glowing faintly in the early light. He watched the sun rise with tired eyes, and behind him, deep inside the gym, something large and wet let out a sigh. By the time the principal arrived that morning, Big John was already long gone. His note was front and center, stuck right between the laminated first day checklist and a cartoon drawing of a smiling apple labeled "Back to School Countdown." Principal Hargrove didn't ask questions. He knew better. He folded the note carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket. Then he walked to his office, poured a whiskey into his coffee, and didn't mention it to anyone. Miss Albright's classroom stayed locked for a week. Eventually, the district said she'd left for personal reasons, that she got cold feet about the job, didn't want to teach anymore, maybe had a family emergency. Her things were boxed up and returned to her listed emergency contact, a sister in Idaho who apparently hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. Nobody ever saw her again. The staff believed what they wanted to believe. Some whispered about what really happened. About how her car was still in the lot for 2 days. How Big John looked 10 years older when he came in the next night. How the gym doors were suddenly chained shut with a lock no one remembered approving. But no one asked John directly. They all liked having him around too much, and deep down, they were scared of what he might say. That next night, John moved slower, not because of age, though his knees weren't what they used to be, but because something about that night had scraped a piece of him raw. He emptied the trash as usual before 9 p.m. sharp, locked the dumpster lid, double-checked the security lights, replaced a burnt-out LED in the stairwell near the science lab. Routine. Routine was the only thing that kept him sane. But there was something new in the air now. Like the creatures inside knew they'd won one. Like they could smell weakness. The gremlins started showing up earlier. Not attacking. Just watching. One perched on a locker near the band room, tapping its claws against the metal. Another stood by the cafeteria exit, its eyes glowing faintly before scurrying away as soon as John raised his light. They were learning. That's what scared him. One night, he caught one in the library. Small, bony, with skin like wet tissue. It was hunched over an open book. Not chewing it, reading it. When John flashed the LED, the thing screamed like a boiling kettle and shot out the side door, ripping the metal hinge off in the process. He patched the door. Didn't tell anyone. Some battles you fight quiet. He started marking new notes on his map of the school. Little red X's where creatures had appeared. Little circles around vents that blew cold air without being connected to anything. The gym got a black marker. Just a big, thick circle with the word "never" scribbled across it, in block letters. Every Friday he sent a reminder to the staff inbox. If you plan to work during the summer night shift, notify John prior to entry. Most ignored it. Some rolled their eyes. But the ones who'd worked there long enough? They knew. And they made damn sure to leave by sundown. One night around mid-July, John was buffing the west hallway when the power cut out. Total darkness. His heart didn't skip a beat, just went straight to overdrive. He pulled his flashlight and turned it on. Nothing. Dead. He pulled the backup from his belt. Also, dead. He cursed. Not now. That's when he heard it, the soft, wet splat of feet on tile. And then a voice, one he hadn't heard since that night. "Big John, help!" Miss Albright. It echoed down the hall like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. He stood frozen for only a second before running, limping slightly, down the hallway toward the breaker room. More footsteps, some dragging, some crawling. They clicked and hissed as they followed, always just behind him, never quite catching up. He reached the breaker room, slammed the door, and locked it behind him. Inside, he found something that shouldn't have been there. A note, written in crayon, childlike and smeared with something that looked like ink. Lights don't save you forever. He tore it down, flipped the breakers, and the LEDs snapped back to life. The hallway was empty again, silent. But he knew they'd tested him, and they'd nearly won. That night he went home and took the old wooden box down from his closet shelf, the one he hadn't opened in 20 years. Inside was his Navy SEAL-issued combat knife, 2 loaded magazines, and a laminated photo of his first night shift at Ridgeway Middle. Young, strong, smiling, like he had no idea what he was getting into. He slid the knife into a sheath on his belt. Then he took out a brand new LED flashlight and said aloud to the empty room, "Let's see if you bastards are brave enough for round 2. 3 nights passed without incident. The school seemed still. Too still. John didn't trust it. He'd worked long enough to know when the monsters were hiding and when they were planning. The air had a pressure to it, like before a storm hits, when everything holds its breath. At 8:45 p.m. he finished his trash rounds. Everything went into the dumpster, nothing forgotten. He even double-checked the break room after seeing a Snickers wrapper poking out from under the vending machine. He wasn't about to let a candy bar cost him his life. At 9:15, he patched up a loose tile in the nurse's office. At 10:30, he sprayed down the locker rooms, keeping his LED lit and his head on a swivel the entire time. The mirrors in the boys' room warped slightly, just like they always did after midnight. He never looked at his reflection after 12 a.m. That was a side rule, unofficial. But one time, years back, he did. And the man in the mirror smiled before he did. Never again. At 2:20 a.m., John stood in the hallway outside the gym. Routine. He didn't have to look, but he always did. He flicked on his military-grade floodlight and aimed it toward the window of the double doors. Just a peek, a glance. The mist was already crawling out. That was new. Usually it didn't seep out until 2:30 on the dot. But now, at 2:21, it was already coiling across the floor like smoke from dry ice. He took a cautious step back. Then, he heard something from inside. A heartbeat. Not his. Something bigger. Thoom. 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 The gym was breathing. The door glass fogged slightly, as if something just behind it was exhaling. John narrowed his eyes. "Not tonight," he muttered, raising the light and tightening his grip. The light flickered, just once. The mist recoiled, then surged forward like a wave, slamming into the doors with a muffled thud. John staggered back and slammed the light switch on the wall. Full power, all LEDs on. The hallway lit up like an operating room. The mist stopped. It didn't retreat, just waited. John turned and marched straight to the custodian's closet. He opened the lockbox where he kept his in-case-it-all-goes-to-hell gear. Out came his reinforced mag light, extra batteries, and a silver crucifix that had belonged to the last janitor, a quiet man named Edgar who vanished in 2004. All that was left of Edgar was a single shoe, found near the gym. He'd be damned if he went out the same way. By 2:35 a.m., the mist was still pressed against the gym doors. Not moving, not growing, just there, like a wall of fog waiting for something. John stood guard, not blinking, not flinching. That's when the intercom crackled again. Same voice. "Big John. Come see." He ignored it. Then the lockers started slamming. Bang, 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 up and down the hallway, like a wave of fists pounding metal. And something knocked from inside the gym. 3 times, sharp and deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Then a voice, low and wet. "We remember you, John." He gritted his teeth. "I ain't scared of y'all." Another knock. Knock, knock, knock. Then come in. He raised the floodlight. "I said, not tonight." He threw the switch again and every LED in the hallway blazed to life. The mist screamed. Not a sound exactly, but a vibration, like the building itself groaned in pain. The light forced it back inch by inch until finally it was gone, pulled back beneath the bleachers like sea foam retreating from shore. Silence fell. The gym stopped breathing. John stayed there until 3:11 a.m., floodlight humming in his hands. Then he locked the doors, added 2 more chains, and carved a fresh warning above the handle with his pocket knife. "This is hell. Do not open." He didn't sleep the next day, just sat in his recliner, watching old war movies with the sound off, thinking. The creatures were changing, getting smarter. They spoke now, mimicked voices, breathed, planned, and they remembered him. 22 years of watching, of protecting. He thought maybe he'd seen it all. He was wrong, because at 4:07 p.m. that same day, while sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped cup, he got a phone call. No number, no caller ID. He answered anyway. All he heard was a whisper. "We're not just in the gym anymore, John." John didn't sleep that day. He sat by the window, LED flashlight in hand, pistol laid out on the kitchen table beside his cold cup of Folgers, watching the sun drop like a stone behind the trees. "They're spreading," he whispered to himself. He didn't know how, didn't know why. Only that the creatures were no longer confined to that cursed gym. Whatever line had once separated their world from his was cracking, and they were leaking through. At 5:01 p.m. he stood, stretched his aching back, holstered his pistol, and buckled his tool belt. On top of the flashlight and knife, he packed extra batteries, peppered salt, and a small leather-bound Bible. He didn't know what would help anymore, but he wasn't going in unprepared. That night, Ridgeway Middle School felt different. The LED lights flickered once when he stepped through the front doors, something they'd never done before. His boots echoed in the halls louder than usual. The air felt humid, thick. At 7:22 p.m., the art room's lights turned themselves on. He went to investigate. Nothing inside but paper cranes scattered across the floor, dozens of them, folded neatly and all facing the door. In the center of the room was a paintbrush still dripping blue. He shut the lights off without saying a word. At 8:59 p.m., he wheeled out the trash like clockwork, dumped it into the dumpster, and slammed the lid. But as he turned to head back in, he froze. A child was standing at the edge of the lot. Small frame, bowl-cut hair, jeans too short, staring at him. "Kid?" John called. The child didn't move. "You lost?" The kid took one step forward. That's when the parking lot light above flickered, and for a split second, John saw it. The child's face was hollow, just a mouth, a gaping mouth stretching ear to ear. John raised the LED and blasted it. The thing screeched and collapsed into a puddle of black mist, slithering under the fence and disappearing into the trees. John stood there a long while, flashlight shaking in his hand. This wasn't just about the gym anymore. By 2:20 a.m., he was back in the hall across from the gym. Everything in him screamed to walk away, to just finish his shift, collect his check, and let the next guy deal with this mess. But that wasn't who he was. He clicked on the floodlight and approached the gym doors. The mist wasn't there, just silence. Still, he raised the light and peered through the window. What he saw chilled him more than anything in 22 years. The bleachers were empty. No fog. No crawling limbs. No upside-down monsters pacing the ceiling. Just an empty court, waxed and gleaming like nothing had ever happened there. And on the floor, a single blue paintbrush. John stepped back. "No," he muttered. "No, no, no." Then came the sound, a scream, high-pitched, real, human. It echoed from somewhere deeper inside the school, not the gym, not the parking lot, inside. "Big John, help!" Miss Albright's voice. He turned, ran. The scream came again, down the English wing this time, then the science labs, then above, the second floor. He sprinted up the stairs, floodlight bouncing wildly in his hand. The scream echoed down the math hall, then twisted into something inhuman, gurgling, wet, snarling. He raised the flashlight, sweeping wildly. And then the lights died. Every LED in the school, gone. The hallway plunged into blackness. He fumbled for his backup, clicked it on. It flickered. Weak. But it was enough to see them. Hundreds of them. Crawling out of lockers, vents, ceiling tiles. Creatures like shadows with teeth, all snarling and smiling. At the front stood her, Miss Albright, but not her. She floated slightly off the floor, her limbs bent wrong. Her smile was too wide. "Thank you for letting us out, John," she said. John raised the flashlight and pulled the trigger on his pistol at the same time. The blast echoed through the halls. The light blinded the creatures, and for a brief second, everything froze. He ran, all the way to the boiler room, where he slammed the emergency lockdown switch. Metal doors groaned down across each wing, trapping the creatures inside their respective halls. For now. By morning, the school was silent again. Lights returned, nothing out of place. Miss Albright was listed as still missing, but John knew better. He left one last note on the staff bulletin board before clocking out. "They're not just in the gym anymore. Stick to the rules, add new ones, keep the lights bright. Don't listen when they call your name. I can't protect this place forever." He locked his locker, took his flashlight, and walked into the sunrise. Big, bad John. The last soldier in a war nobody else believed in. And somewhere inside Ridgeway Middle School, the gym started to breathe again.